using for our mask. We're using a quilting ruler, pair of scissors, pins, tailor's chalk. I have a binding tool here that I'll show you how to use, and then I also have my 2 rotary cutters, one that's just a straight blade and then one that's a pinking blade. This is for those who don't have a serger at home. So I have my 3 pattern pieces. This is my lining. As you can see, this edge has been pinked with my pinking blade, so this won't fray. And then I've drawn in my seam allowance. This is my front, and then this is a pocket that's going to go inside to hold a filter that's changeable. You want to use a breathable fabric, so something that's 100% cotton, 100% linen, 100% silk. All of those would be great. Obviously, the thinner the weave, the more layers you need. So this is actually like a pretty good medium weight cotton. So I'm going to have, in total, I'll have 2 layers plus my 2 layers of the replaceable fiber. You just want to make sure that it's breathable and that it's pre-washed. A lot of the manufacturers who are selling these fabrics are spraying them with all sorts of chemicals because they're in storage for so long. So make sure that you're washing your fabrics before you create your mask. The filter material, this is something that's going to be going inside the mask. Once our mask is finished, we'll have these pockets on the side which our material can go in. So your mask will be washable, but these filter materials are replaceable. These are just some things I found around my place. This is like a dish towel that you can get from the dollar store, paper towel, or a coffee filter that I pressed flat. Each of them I use 2 layers because 2 layers is what's recommended. For strapping around the ears here, I found elastic, but I noticed that in the stores, I had a really hard time finding elastic. So at Michael's, I did find this jewelry elastic, which is pretty good. I don't think that would be too uncomfortable around your ears. If you have a bigger elastic like this, you could do a strap that goes around the neck and around the back of the head rather than around the ears. Or you could use twill tape. That would go around, probably I would do it like a tie around the back of the head. And you could do that, or you could use ribbon so if you don't have something that's stretchy. Or binding is another good material to use. Something small that you can tie around your ears or your head. If you don't have binding, I'll show you how to make a piece of binding. So for binding, I bought one of these binding presser foots just at Michael's. This is for a 1/2 inch binding, so it's gonna end up looking like this when it's finished, where it's been pressed in the center in quarters to give us a 1/2 inch bind. So to do this, you're gonna start with a 1 inch piece of fabric. You can cut it on bias, but honestly this is just going around our ears, so it doesn't really need to be on bias. Maybe to go over the bridge of the nose, it'd be easier if it was bias. On the back there, it's gonna fill in here. So then as it starts to come out, that's when we'll be pressing it. So then once it's finished, you'll just press it again in half. Well, I like to give a little bit more space. So I'll do like maybe a 1/16 less than half. And then that's your homemade piece of binding. If you don't have time to go out and get this little tool, which I got from Michael's, you could also just press it in, and then in half by hand. That works too. Without serging, I just use my pinking blade to do the edges that I know are gonna be raw inside the mask. So far I have 3/8 all the way around my curves and 1/2 inch here and 1/2 inch here. So everything is 3/8 except for these 2 sides. And those 2 sides are here, what's gonna be holding your elastic. So the first thing I wanna do is pre-press. So the lining, I'm not gonna pre-press. These 2 pieces, I'm gonna pre-press this back at 3/8, this back at 1/2, and over here back at 1/2. So this is my mask, pressed back at 1/2 inch, and then I can sew these together at 3/8. And my pockets that are going to be holding the filter. This is pressed back 1/2 inch, which will line up with that. And this has been pinked because I'm actually going to be sewing this, and this is going to be a raw edge inside. So I just pinked it so that it wouldn't fray. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is sew down here at a 1/16 or a foot's width on your machine, just to get this nice and flat, and then I'll move on to sewing my nose bridges for myself and my nose bridge on my lining. And these are both 3/8. Okay, so here you have an option if you want to top stitch it or do a decorative stitch down the nose. You could do that. I'm going to grade and do staggered clips along the nose so that it lays nice and flat. So I'm going to do that for both. Pockets going down first. So here, this is where my elastic's gonna go. So I'm actually just gonna be sewing around the top and around the bottom. That's why I pre-press this. So this is gonna sit here. And then our lining with right sides together is gonna sit on top. Okay, so what's important is that these two seams are lining up there at the top and at the bottom so that your mask isn't twisting. So I'm going to sew it at 3/8. Back stitch this time. So I've sewn it at the top and at the bottom, and I'm going to pull it through this way. These are going to stay open until we set our elastic in, and then our elastic we're just going to top stitch. Okay, so here's our mask before we put on the ear straps. And so for ear straps, this totally depends on the size of your own head or whoever head, but I did 7 inches. And I'm also going to mark in 3/8 to 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side. And that's going to sit in at the top, right up to your mark, and at the bottom, up to your mark. And then we're going to just do an edge stitch. You could do 1 or 2, or again, another decorative stitch if that's what you did on your nose. All right, let's try out our coffee filters. So again, the whole mask is washable, but these are replaceable. So anytime you go out, you get a little bit of extra protection.